Good afternoon, everyone. I'll look to call the 13th meeting of the Civic Works Committee to begin. Please check the city website for any additional details and detailed information regarding this committee meeting. Meetings can be viewed via live stream on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenapewick and Attawandaron. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home, the City of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I will go to item number 1, disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I will move to item number 2, which is our items for consent. You'll see that there are 3 items in front of you. I'll look for a mover and a seconder on those items. Councillor Cuddy and Councillor Van Meerbergen. And any questions before we entertain the consent items? Councillor Trasso.
I just wanted to ask a question on 2.2. Is this just something routine that would normally happen, or is there something special with this that's unusual?
Mr. Stanford?
Through the chair, the reason it's here is that the amount that has come in is over the budget that we had established for 2023. So the reason it's here is that it's coming in as a result that is an increase in cost. So we bring that to your attention in this case.
Any additional items on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
I'll vote yes.
Closing, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have no scheduled items, so we'll move on to item number 4, items for direction. You'll see that we've got item 4.1, the 9th report of the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee, and with that, a request for delegation from our Bucol. I understand that Mr. Bucol has joined us online. I will look for a mover and a seconder to accept that delegation. Oh, sorry, he's a committee member, so we don't need to have a mover and seconder. Okay, with that, we will check and see if Mr. Bucol is able to come onto the screen for us. Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Bucol, you'll have 5 minutes, and please begin when you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee. Now, I would like to share my screen if I may.
You are able to share your screen.
Okay, just bringing it up. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen. So I would like to begin with a little bit of context. I think that everybody agrees with is London essentially is a car-centric city, as are most modern cities in Ontario, Canada, North America, and even the world. And the characteristic of a car-centric city is that most people own a car and most trips are done by car. Transit and active transportation are used primarily by people who do not have access to or own a car, and most of those people would prefer to drive a car if they could. Okay, so I think that is the context of London as it is now. Now, looking at the mode share targets that you see on the screen, I've presented a number of mode shares that are historical from 2009, 2016, 2019, as well as some mode share targets that have been proposed in the Transportation Master Plan for 2020 and 2023, 2020 and 2030, and the proposed mode shares in the draft Master Mobility Plan for 2050. And the characteristic that I point out is that the mode shares reflect the nature of a car-centric city, and that the targets are essentially status quo with very little change. So basically, if you look at active transportation in 2019, it was 15%, and the target for 2020 or 2050 in the most ambitious plan is 18%. The mode share target for private vehicles in 2019 was 73.5, and the target in the most optimistic scenario for 2050 is 65%. And I would argue that these are not sufficiently ambitious targets. And also a widespread assumption is that the climate emergency will be addressed simply by people substituting their current gas-powered SUVs and pickup trucks, which are the most common form of vehicles, with new electric SUVs and pickup trucks. And I would argue, and I think there is agreement by many experts, that this is not sufficient to meet climate change targets. Now, I would also argue that the mode share targets do not reflect what is actually required to meet the climate change targets. A couple of years ago, the London Cycling Advisory Committee prepared a very detailed report through a climate change lens of what kind of targets would actually be needed to achieve climate change targets. And they determined that the mode share for private vehicles had to be reduced to 25%, which is a significantly lower number than any of the targets that have been proposed in any of the London plans. This seems like a very ambitious number, but it is achievable. The global gold standard typically used is Amsterdam, which is a very bicycle-friendly city. And the mode share in Amsterdam currently for private vehicles is 20%. So it is actually possible to achieve radically different mode share targets than what are being proposed. Now, an important point that I like to make is that there's a perception that London is a very car-dependent city and that alternative modes other than cars are not practical. But what is actually true, and this is shown by the trip surveys, and as well as looking at the actual distances traveled in London. And in fact, 70% of trips in London are shorter than 7 kilometers. Okay, this is not widely appreciated. A 7-kilometer trip is easily done in a 15-minute bike ride. And what that suggests is that London essentially already is a 15-minute city, which by definition is a city where most needs can be reached within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. So this is an important thing to realize. Now, the reality of it is, even though most trips can be done by bike, currently only around 1% of trips actually are done by bike. And this is typical, again, of most Canadian and North American cities. So the reality of it is, pardon me?
You have 30 seconds?
30, I thought I had 5 minutes.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Of 5 minutes. Okay. So let me conclude that it is possible to reduce mode share. And imagine, instead of owning private cars, we had a system where people could use or borrow cars as they needed for each particular trip, and had access to a variety of other more efficient modes, such as bicycles, micro electric cars for short trips, and so on. And with a system like this, we could massively reduce the mode share for cars.
Thank you, Mr. Buchel. That is your time.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Councillor Trasso?
Yes, in light of the fact that we have a very short agenda today, and this is this is a presentation from one of our advisory committees. I'd really like to hear his presentation, so I move we give him another 5 minutes. I think it's really important that we recognize representatives from our advisory committee. This is not like we have a long line of people waiting to speak, so I'd like to move that his time be extended.
Councillor McAllister?
Oh, I'm just seconding that.
Okay, I do have a motion on the floor to extend Mr. Buchel's time. I will say, although we do not have an additional item on the agenda, we do have, or items for direction, we do have additional items as well. But I will hear from the committee on this matter. Councillor Van Meerbergen?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's reasonable we give an extension to the presentation. So I'll vote in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll open that for voting if there's no further comments.
Closing. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Mr. Buchel, please feel free to continue.
Okay, thank you. I probably need less time than the time it took to vote. Hopefully a minute or so will be enough. So to get to the conclusion, how can we actually significantly reduce mode share for cars to make a real impact and a real difference? And it's generally agreed that we need to make driving less attractive and the alternatives more attractive. But the problem is, in a car-centric city, everybody feels that they need a car for certain trips. They need a car to go camping with the kids. They need a car to take the kids to soccer practice. And the problem is, once you own a car and there's a car sitting in your driveway, it becomes the most convenient option for virtually every trip. And it's very difficult to convince people to leave the car in the driveway and walk or take the bus or cycle instead. So let's imagine an alternative system where instead of owning a car, you could borrow a car whenever you need one and pay per use. So this essentially is a car share system. If you didn't have to own the car, but you had to pay each time you used it, you probably would choose sustainable alternatives more often. Now, suppose you also had a range of sustainable alternatives also available for borrowing, and these included bikes or e-bikes for commuting and short trips, transit perhaps for trips downtown, e-cargo bikes for shopping, and perhaps electric microcars, very small 1 or 2 seat cars similar to golf carts that you could use for the majority of short urban trips. A system like this could probably reduce the number of car trips you needed by an order of magnitude. And I would suggest that the vast majority of trips could be accommodated more cost effectively and much more sustainably with a system like this. It would be relatively easy to get a factor of 10 reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and in other words, 90% or more. And it would also be easy to achieve very aggressive mode share targets of 20% car use or less. And that was basically the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I will look to committee to see if there were any additional comments. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Chair. It's always good in a democracy to hear other points of view. You know, certainly there's much in this presentation that I certainly don't agree with, and I would venture to say that a lot of Londoners don't either, but it's always good to hear other points of view. And with that, I'd like to move a motion that the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee be thanked and their presentation be received with no further action.
Seconder, Councillor Cuddy. Counselor Van Meerbergen, there is a motion drafted and loaded into eScribe that contains A, the attached presentation with respect to the mobility master plan be received by the Civic Works Committee for their consideration, and B, the London Transit Commission be requested to provide the following information to the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee, and then it further goes into detail of what those requests were. Would you, do you want to include that in your motion and then include take no action? Sorry, could you use your microphone?
Repeat the motion?
Yeah, so if you want to make an amendment to the motion, or you just want to make a.
Yeah, I'm just going to move this motion, yeah. That the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee be thanked and their presentation be received with no further action.
Okay, and Counselor Cuddy, you're okay to second that? Okay, thank you. And Counselor Trostle, you have your hand up, go ahead.
I think that's a little abrupt, and I'm not going to be supporting that motion. I would like to hear a little bit more discussion. I would like to hear some reaction from staff, and I do have some questions for the presenter. So just to come out of the gate with no further action. Well, of course there's going to be further action because the question of our mobility master plan discussion and consultation is ongoing, and this is very broad. Now, at the last council meeting, at the last Civic Works Committee, we had a long discussion about this matter, and one of the questions that came up was how can we get a little bit more hands-on? And I raised the question of whether a counselor could participate in the committee. One of the things I'd like to do is ask the presenter if he would be willing to join this working group, and whether that would be okay with staff. Is that something that we could just do, or is that something we would need a formal motion going up to council for? Because I do think we need more eyes on this. And I'm not finished with my questions, but I want to send that to staff first.
Okay, and so through the chair to Ms. Scheer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to having members of the community sit on our staff project teams and staff steering committees, I would advise against that. Those are working teams for staff, and some of those discussions are confidential at that time. We are meeting regularly with the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee. This is a standing item. They have a sub-team that is working on it that staff are happy to support. So if the ask is could people from the committee join staff teams, I would advise no. We're happy to work with the team, a subcommittee that's been set up at the community, or sorry, at the Community Advisory Committee.
And through the chair, may I ask the presenter what?
Follow-up, Counselor?
Through the chair, if I may ask the presenter, what is your subcommittee asking us to do today?
I believe having more active input into the actual working team would be helpful in whatever format would be agreeable. The situation right now is we're generally fairly unaware of what the discussions are within the team until a report is presented to us, like the one that recently came forward. And then we have the opportunity to respond, but there isn't really any, back and forth discussion of any significance other than going through formal committees.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Follow-up. So I'm looking to staff. Short of your formal, I feel we're in a situation right now where we will get we'll get a staff report on Thursday, and it comes to our committee on Tuesday. And I do want to see more back and forth, and I did raise this at the last meeting, and I'm wondering how we can do that.
Madam Chair, I don't want to venture into clerk's territory. Maybe Ms. Westlake Power is on the call. I would suggest that the ability to have early council involvement in ongoing staff efforts or to change the nature of how we engage with the community advisory committees might be best referred to governance working group for a more fulsome discussion. Right now, staff have a work plan that is laid out and touch points planned with a variety of stakeholders, including the community advisory committees. We don't really have a mechanism by which to bring them into our in-house teams that would be appropriate. I think it's a bigger question than we'd want to answer from just the transportation planning side.
Thank you.
next-
Counselor, does that satisfy?
No, it certainly doesn't. It absolutely doesn't, because transferring this to the governance working group, well, for those of us who have been engaged in the governance working group know how backed up we are and how busy we are with other things. But I want to work around this, and I want to find something that satisfies people. If I hear you undertaking that you are going to be continuing your engagement with the advisory committee through their subcommittee, that's positive. But what I would like to do then is, and I will be putting a motion on the floor.
Okay, Counselor, we have a motion on the floor right now.
I
So
understand that. I didn't put a motion on the floor. I said I will later in the meeting put a motion on the floor. And I want to get staff's reaction. I want to get staff's reaction to the consideration that the planning horizon is too long, because these are things that you can work on yourself, that consider walking and cycling separately, and that the mode share targets need another option. We eliminated option 1. And what I'm hearing from the presenters here is we need another option that is closer to what the Cycling Advisory Committee came up with. So are these things that you can incorporate into your work without a formal motion, or do we need a formal motion to ask you to look at those things?
Ms. Scheer?
Madam Chair, with respect to the planning horizon being long, as the report comes forward that outlines the actions associated with the plan, it will be broken up into sub-horizons. You've not seen that yet because we're not there yet. That work is in progress at this time. With respect to cycling and pedestrianism being considered separately, yes, they will be. They're rolled together right now here. But as we talk about the plans and interventions and programs and supports for both modes, both of those will have interconnected, because there are interconnections, but also separate strategies where they're independent. With respect to, and I'm sorry, what was the last one?
Was adding another mode share target in the other direction from the one we eliminated.
Madam Chair, because we recently have brought this to council, received the direction to proceed with options 2 and 3 for consideration, we are intending to report back to this committee in October with a recommendation. I believe it's the 24th cycle. At that time, if you're not satisfied with what staff have brought to you, that would be a time to refer it back to staff for additional work with the support of the committee and council.
Thank you. So back to the debate on the amendment from the councilor. I still am going to be opposing this amendment, because I think that take no further action is sort of in conflict with everything we've just said. We are going to take further action. So I'm fine with receiving the report. I'm fine with saying that we received a delegation. We heard the report. There were some questions. Other members of this council may have some questions too, but I don't think taking no further action is useful to have in the motion. And I would ask that that be withdrawn, because I think it's very contrary, if not hostile, to what we're trying to do here.
Thank you. Counselor Van Meerbergen, you're speaking to your motion.
Yeah, just by way of commentary, I think it's useful to remind ourselves now and then that we're the standing committee and we have advisory committees, and that's what they are, and that's what they do. They advise, and that's what they've done today. We've listened to their presentation. We've given them even an extension. We've heard what they had to say, and a motion has followed through. So we have to, again, remind ourselves that we receive advice and opinions, but it's this committee that makes the decision, and ultimately council. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Counselor McAllister.
Thank you, and through the chair. Recognizing that there was already the pre-drafted motion, there was, which we can see. I understand, obviously, in terms of them presenting the information, but they did also have requests in terms of what they're asking for in terms of information from London Transit. And I personally don't think that that was out of line. I think that that's appropriate. Yes, they are an advisory committee, but they are requesting information. And I'd just like to know through the chair to staff, if any of that had been requested in the original motion is out of line, or do you believe that that's something that could be easily gathered? Thank you.
Ms. Scheer?
So Madam Chair, I don't believe the information that's requested to be provided from London Transit is out of line. We would provide a request after council approval to their committee, to their commission, and they would act on that based on their own bylaw and parameters. But I don't even know that that's even necessary. I think that can be requested staff to staff. There are a number of things in the content that was provided by our advisory committee that merit further consideration as the plan unfolds, and that data that would be received from London Transit will be helpful for the advisory committees. They continue to weigh in on the mobility master plan.
Councillor McAllister?
Thank you, and through you. So again, I think the original motion that had been drafted, I think is actually more appropriate. The current one, I don't think I will support, because really what they were asking for is that this information be received, that they get some more information, and that this be worked into consideration of the master mobility plan. From what I'm hearing from staff, that will be done regardless, that you take this into account in terms of your working groups with the committees. But I do think it's appropriate, they've taken the time to come to us, present their information and ask for some, that we acknowledge that, and that's why I think the original motion is actually more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers to this motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. This is on the motion? It was Van Meerbergen's motion, seconded by Councillor Cuddy. Councillor, do you want to?
Wasn't that an amendment as to what was on the screen?
No, this was a separate motion.
Okay, so if we want to reinstate what the original motion was, we have to vote this down.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Trasso? Closing the vote, the motion fails 2-3.
Thank you. So I'm in the hands of the committee for where to go next. Councillor McAllister.
I would like to put the original motion on the floor.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder.
Could you read it again?
It's going to be up on the screen for you, but the original motion was that the following actions be taken with respect to the 9th report of the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee from its meeting held on August 16, 2023. The attached presentation with respect to the Mobility Master Plan be received by the Civic Works Committee for their consideration, and B, the London Transit Commission be requested to provide the following information to the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee. And then there's listed provisions associated with that. And then C, clause 1.1, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4 be approved. Councillor Van Meerbergen, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Chair, where did this motion come from?
So it was part of the ITCAC, the Integrated Transportation Committee's report. So it was part of the recommendations that came out of that report with the request for the additional communications that they were, or the information that they were requesting. So it's a motion to receive and then provide them with the additional information provided.
So the clauses were just,
1 second, sorry. Counselor Van Meerbergen, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm just a little confused. Usually the advisory committees don't set the motion like we set the motion. So the original motion was my motion. This may be an ask, but it's not the original motion.
so those were the motions made during the IT integrated transportation meeting, which are brought to you, to this committee, and for you to make a final decision on. So yes, these are their asks, but they were motions made during the previous meeting.
And if I could get clarification on part C of what these clauses are?
They're just the remainder of the clauses from the report. So like item 1.1 was disclosures of pecuniary interest, but no action was made on those, so you just vote to receive the clauses.
Thank you. Yeah, it's everything under consent on page 19 of your package. Counselor Trosso.
Yes, thank you. That clarifies my question. So if it's not already on the table, I will move the motion that's on the screen.
It's already been moved and seconded. Any additional comments?
Thank you.
Counselor Van Meerbergen?
I'll be voting against this motion. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, any further speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Counselor Trosso? Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-2.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to item number 5, which is deferred matters and additional business. I will hand the chair over to Vice Chair McAllister so that I may ask a question.
Okay, recognizing that I have the chair. Go ahead, Councilor Rom.
Thank you. I prepared a question for today in relationship to communication that I had received from the community. Dating back a few months ago, I was contacted by the Guru Nanak Mission Society regarding their concern around the scattering of ashes in our community. They were not aware of any guidelines associated for organizations to pass on to their membership and to pass on to community members around our practice of scattering ashes in waterways. From there, I have had subsequent conversations with staff and was looking for an opportunity to update the community as well as this committee on what those guidelines could be and the communication going forward.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm good to go.
Apologies, I forgot I was chair. Please go ahead, Ms. Chair.
No worries. I forget sometimes where I am too. But thank you, Councilor Rahman. I wanted to thank the faith communities who've reached out to us with respect to this matter for their patience and us getting back to them with an approach as to how to manage the scattering of ashes in municipal waterways. We originally were under the belief that we were required to pass a bylaw and designate specific locations for this activity. We've gone through a very comprehensive review with support from our colleagues in legal, and it is our best understanding that that is actually not required, that this is already a permitted activity in city parks and city waterways, as long as it is contained to the scattering of ashes and to organic floral tributes like flower petals and flowers. So what I would recognize is we probably have a gap in that information being provided to community members, either through faith-based groups or just general London residents who might be interested in this as an end-of-life celebration for their loved ones. So we certainly can provide some immediate information out to the community, confirming that yes, this practice is permitted, and then we can do some additional work to provide more information about well-accessible locations that can support this safely for folks. Although you can do it anywhere that you choose to, there are probably some areas easier to access along the river. And we will integrate this as well into our river management strategies on a go-forward basis. So as we're designing and thinking about how people might access the river for recreational, scenic purposes, that there's also that desire to do this for end-of-life and religious purposes as well. And we want to make sure that there's that respectful and safe opportunity for people to do that too.
Thank you. If I may follow up?
No, follow up, go ahead.
Thank you. Just wondering when the community can expect to have a location available that they may be able to do that.
So at this time, Councillor Rahman, they could do this at any location that they can currently access. We are going to make some minor improvements to accessibility for AODA compliance at the Riverside Boat Launch, and we will be doing that work immediately along with some signing and some general tidying of the area. Into 2024, we're actually going to do some more substantive improvements at that location, and that information can be shared and there can be some engagement for that process. And then as we continue to move forward, we'll be looking for other locations that can support this in a little more formal way to make sure that it is safe and meets accessibility needs for people who are remembering their loved ones. I would also suggest that we can get some information out quite quickly, just letting people know that this is something that they can do, and also letting other users of these very valued spaces in our city know that to be respectful, and if people are engaging in an end-of-life celebration for their loved ones, that they should leave them to do that in peace and use that space later when that work is done.
Any more questions? Okay, and thank you, Steph. I will return the chair to Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. We have one item for confidential today, item 6.1. Oh, Councillor Trasso? Is this
Yes,
on?
under item 5, just to follow up on some discussion that we had at the last meeting about the green bin rollout, and that we're here now, and the students are back, and we had some discussion about some additional materials that could go out in the near campus neighborhood, which I would assist you with, but could you give me an update on what that is going to entail?
Thank you. Before I go to staff, I'm going to turn the chair back over to Councillor McAllister as I have to go, if you don't mind. Thank you, and I'll have you chair the rest of the meeting.
And
Thank
recognizing that I will come over there. Go ahead, Mr. Stander.
Thank you, and through the chair, 2 items have occurred. First and foremost, all the students that are working with off-campus housing have received information directly from Student Services. There was a door delivery that is either complete or underway. So all the dates for the interim calendar are in their possession now. There will be an additional interim calendar with the city logo prepared as well. That should be available in about a week to 10 days. And that will be made available, as we had for a previous discussion, for any councillors that wish to be involved in any type of handout in that case. And we'll be also contemplating additional deliveries into student areas where the message might not be getting through.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I assume I don't have to bring this to this committee table to continue asking questions. I can just work directly through your office on this?
Through the acting chair, absolutely. For an item like that, we're also in conversation with Western, who will notify us, as along with Fanshawe, if there are hot pockets where information is not clearly being digested. So we're here to help not only the committee members here, but also the community.
Thank you.
Just bear with me for one moment as I log in. Okay, so we are currently on item number 6. We'll be going in camera. Yes. So I need a mover and a seconder to go in camera, please. Councillor Trasso, can I get a seconder? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Counselor Trasso?
Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, we're now back in public session. I'll ask Councillor Cuddy to report from our closed session.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and through you. We went into in-camera session at 12:45. We made progress on confidential matters, and we ended our session at 12:50. Thank you, and through you.
Okay, thank you. We are now on item 7, which is adjournment. Could I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Cuddy? And, okay, Councillor Trussell seconds. Okay, all those in favor of adjournment? Okay. Could I get the hands? Motion to adjourn. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.